Now, to really make this section pop and to make it interesting, I have to actually use a couple of things that I wish I didn't have to use so early, but I got to create a variable here. Okay, so close your eyes, don't look, create a variable, call it I, or I'll just call it my variable, and it'll be an integer, and I'll initialize it at a 0. So since you're not looking, you didn't see me create my variable, and you can open your eyes now. Okay, now we are going to cover variables a little bit later, so don't worry, we will get plenty of coverage in variables here. Let's start with the for loop container. Drag it on. Instantly you see the red with the white. Cool. Right click and edit. So here's what I want to do. I want to execute the tasks inside this container, and you can see I grab a task and I drag it into the container, and now when I move the container, you can see that task is contained within the for loop. Okay, so however many times the for loop is going to execute, now that script task will execute once per iteration. Okay? So I'm going to right click and I'm going to tell it to edit. And I'm going to assign my initialization expression. So my variable, I have a variable named my variable. And the shortcut way to reference my variable is using the @ sign, just like in Transact SQL. So I say @ my variable equals 0. So I am initializing my for loop. Okay? Then I say that the evaluation is as long as my variable is less than 5, continue. Okay, so basically this statement, let's just make some notes right here about the evaluation expression. This is going to be, oh, you know what, I'll tell you what, let me do this first. The assignment is my variable equals my variable plus 1. And let's now zoom in, and this will probably be a little bit easier. I'm going to move it up here. And so this equates to our for loop that we had, right? So this was our for int I equals 0, or actually, let me do int my variable equals 0, my variable less than 5, my variable plus plus here. Okay, that was our for loop. Do something. Okay, so that equates to the exact same logic we have up here in the top. Let's come up here. So we're initializing at 0 here. You can see here and here. That's the exact same thing. So we're starting from 0. Then we say as long as the value of my variable is less than 5, sorry about that, as long as it's less than 5, okay, then I want you to do the code that's in between the curly braces. Or in the case of the for loop, I want you to execute the task. And then at the last one, my bad. The last one here is simply iterating through our counter here. And this was, oh, forget it. Terrible, Scott, come on. This was the my variable plus plus. So my variable equal my variable plus 1. Okay, that's what that was set to. Okay? And I've just accidentally messed up my logic there, sorry. Variable equal my variable plus 1. Now let me go ahead and answer some questions that I can anticipate. What did I do? I can anticipate people having. I seem to have a lot of trouble with this. Sorry about that. Your initialization expression does not have to be equal to 0. You can initialize to the value of another variable. For example, if we have a variable that stores the number of columns in an Excel spreadsheet, I can initialize the value to the number of columns in the Excel spreadsheet. Okay, which might have been previously defined in another step or another task that is executed prior to my for loop here. My evaluation expression, any side of this can be, or this right here could be another variable. So I put a literal value, 5, but it could also be a variable here. You might have that defined at runtime. Generally, your assignment expression is probably something like a +1, but it could be mod, the modulus operator. It could be multiplication, subtraction, some way that you make the eval expression evaluate to false. Let me make sure you understood what I just said here. Let's zoom back in. You see, the loop finishes, the loop will stop when this evaluates to false. So while the evaluation expression evaluates to true, the loop keeps going. As long as my variable is less than 5, awesome, let me do it. But as soon as my variable is 5 or is greater than 5, then the loop executes. So your assign expression strictly is designed to get you to finish the loop, right? And that's why the incrementing by 1 is so common here. Don't worry so much about the expressions right now. We're going to talk about those later on. I'm not going to use those now. But you notice that when I correctly configure my for loop, the red circle goes away. Okay? If I get my syntax wrong, like less than at I, okay? And you can see here at I don't have a variable named I. So when I do that and I say OK, now I'm back to the red circle, and it says, thankfully, there's a nice error message. The variable I was not found. So just go back and change it. And you can just double click on it to do that. Okay. Now I could, I'll do this. I'm going to change my script task. Now feel free to close your eyes if you're a little bit afraid of the script task right now. I'm going to tell it that I want to work with the variable my variable, and I want to add in some code that basically loops through, and every time we go through this iteration it will tell me. So I say again, message box.show, don't have to look if you don't want to, hey, and we'll iterate through, and we'll just say dts.variables and my variable. Okay, I'm not even going to spend a second talking about the syntax. We've got plenty of time to worry about that. We're going to come up with that syntax a little bit later. In particularly, like 3 videos from now, I'm going to show you exactly how to do that and how it all works. Because this is for learning SSIS, a handy little tool. So I'm going to execute the package here. And when I do, all I've told it to do is for each time that it iterates through, pop up a message box and tell me what iteration this is. So this is 0. Remember, we did something akin to let me do this. We did this, right, for int my variable equals 0. So we initialized it at 0. And so when it pops up and says, hey, 0 is the first iteration, that's why. And then it just starts iterating through to the next one. Hey 1, hey 2, hey 3, hey 4. And so then right now, when I say OK, what's going to happen is SSIS will then update the value of my variable to be 5, but then 5 is not less than 5, and so it will end the for loop. And we have now finished our for loop. So I know that that's not a lot of real world stuff. You're not going to take that immediately and put it into some package and just start executing it. But like I said, we've got to do some real world stuff. We've got to do some conceptual, theoretical, here's how it works and here's what it is before we can get too deep with this stuff. Now the last one that I want to show in this video, and I know I'm kind of running out of time here for this one, notice that I can collapse the containers. And I can do things like this. I could drag this in here, and now inside that container are multiples, and I can drag it out of the container so that it's not constrained by the container anymore. Okay, but you see that it's in there. Now the other one here is the sequence container. Okay, so this is simply, I can drag a bunch of things in here that will execute. And the purpose of this really is just to say, I want that grouping of tasks to execute all as one thing. So I'm just dragging random things on here, but I want this for loop to run, and then I want all this stuff to happen. And then when all that stuff is finished, I want to execute a DTS 2000 package. That's all it is. There's really not much else to it. There's no for loops. It executes only a single time. There's not much to the sequence container except for it's handy to be able to group related tasks together and say, I want this whole set of tasks to run on error, or this whole set of tasks to run on success. Okay, so that's a basic overview of the for loop and the sequence container. Let's come back in the next video and talk about the group and the for each.